in traffic on our way over.
Okay.
You have one or do you have one?
Yes, we do.
Awesome, then let's get started and
Okay.
when I get here, then. All right. It
Did you
is.
report on that?
Oh my God, I've been in person, I don't know. It is Thursday, August 12th. We will call this meeting to order at 5:36 p.m. All right. If you want to do a roll call of the members.
Sure. Commissioner Kate Murphy, Commissioner Fred Wolf,
Here?
Commissioner Rob Eber,
Here.
Commissioner Aaron Gradinsky, Chair Stephanie Dahl,
Here.
Vice Chair Leviton,
Here.
Commissioner Chelsea Scott is absent. Okay.
Do we no longer do a pledge of allegiance?
I forgot to add it back on the agenda now that we're back in person. I apologize. We can go ahead and do it.
Okay, perfect. Is that intentional?
No.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. For audience participation, I do not see anybody, so we'll move past that. In our packets that we all received are the minutes from our June, we did not have a July meeting, so from our June 10th, 2021 meeting. If everybody has had an opportunity to review those, if we have any additions or corrections. Hearing none, can I have a motion and a second?
I move to approve the minutes from June.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, so I think first on our agenda is some unfinished business with regards to our trail signs. And just for the record, Commissioner Kate Murphy is now present.
Thank you. Well, welcome back, first of all. It's good to see everybody again. It's fun to be in person again. So this is picking up on an item that PTRC talked about in May last. So these are adding additional signs along specifically the Highline Canal Trail regarding e-bikes and speed limits. So we did add signage since we last met at either end of the Highline, so right after the Hamden Underpass and right after the Bellevue Underpass. So folks coming in to the city on either end are aware of both the speed limit and that the city doesn't allow e-bikes. So we had hoped to wait until the Highline Canal signs, the wayfinding signs had been installed along the Highline, and then sort of layer some of our extra signs on top of it, since the wayfinding signs will address the speed limit specifically. But there have been delays, as there have been with many other things, for the fabrication of those signs. So we expect them to go in this fall. So we want to go ahead and move forward with adding some more e-bike and speed limit signs based on feedback from PTRC and council and some of the feedback that we're getting from the community. So in your packet we have, and actually I can pull it up on the screen here, we have suggested designs for the additional signs that we have. Let me pull that up really quick. So our hope is to be able to use the existing bollards that we have along the Highline with some of our other trail signs on them, and have these signs attached to the existing bollards. We might have to add a few going forward, depending on where all the wayfinding signs fall and sort of the cadence of the signing along the canal. But these are what we're suggesting to add for the no e-bike signs and for the speed limit signs. So really I'm just looking for feedback from PTRC. If you're happy with these designs, we'll move forward with ordering them and starting to put them up along the Highline.
Emily, so do I interpret that the no e-bike sign with the red slash, they're not up now,
Correct.
I would suggest that every bridge access to the Highline Canal in the village have that sign. When people cross the bridge and enter the Highline, they should be looking right at that sign. So, I don't know how many bridges I haven't counted them lately, but that's an entry point for people on an e-bike. So, I would think that should be where they should be located.
Okay.
Yeah, have we gotten any feedback on the underpass signs?
We've gotten a little bit of feedback that they're sort of intrusive, maybe is not the right word, but they're a little bit much. So I think that they're good for our purposes for letting people know and being attention grabbing. I don't think that design, you'll see that one's a little bit bigger, and it doesn't actually say speed limit on it, which we would change going forward. I think that for when you're on trail, the smaller signs are probably a little bit more consistent with the feel of the rest of the village rather than the larger black and white sign.
Mhm. Well, just let me get this off my chest here. I mentioned it to Jeff and to Pamela when I came in. I understand that the police department has bought an e-bike to patrol the Highline Canal. I think that is totally wrong. That sends the wrong message. If they want to patrol the Highline Canal, they should be on a mountain bike. If we're trying to say no e-bikes on the Highline, and here's the policeman on his e-bike, that just doesn't square. And I will talk to Michelle about this, because I was flabbergasted when I read that. I mean, I can't believe nobody else thinks that that's wrong.
I think it's just, it's helpful for them to be able to catch up to cyclists who are speeding, to be able to speak with them. And there are provisions in the code that, you know, police are obviously permitted in many cases outside of trails too, and on trails, to do things that a layperson can't, right? Whether they need to, you know, send a vehicle somewhere for safety that you and I couldn't drive, right? And there are provisions in the code for them to be able to use motorized vehicles, just like park staff can use motorized vehicles for maintenance, and utility companies can too. So they found it a useful tool to be able to cover a lot of ground. It's also not just about speed, it's about, they'll ride it on the Highline and bridle trails as well. So they've been able to cover basically all of the trails in a day on an e-bike, having an officer on an e-bike versus,
Well,
they also have a mountain bike too.
you just said that they're gonna be riding this e-bike on bridle trails?
They already are.
Although Fred, I would respectfully say I would hold a different position because it's the police officer. And they're gonna be on there unless pursuing someone at an appropriate speed, handling it appropriately. I think the issue that, from what I have heard from council, from our residents in terms of the e-bike, is the speed and disregard for other people around in which they ride. And also other bikers who are not just on e-bikes, right? It's kind of all of them. And so I think to allow, if we want patrol and we want enforcement on our trails, I think we have to give the police the ability to do so. And I think just a regular mountain bike, if they are not truly avid riders and things like that, they're never gonna catch up to somebody who's riding that fast and out of control. And so it limits their ability to enforce, would be my kind of position on it.
Okay, I disagree, but whatever.
Would it be helpful to, I do think it does send a mixed message when we kind of outlawed the e-bikes on the trail, but would it be helpful if we had an article in the Villager explaining why, if we're gonna say no e-bikes in the village, no e-bikes on the canal, if we have a letter in the village criers stating why the position, why we are allowing it for the police officers.
I- We could run an article in the Crier. I really hesitate to start getting into, it's always a difficult thing trying to explain policing and why policing happens in a certain way. I'm very hesitant I can't do that, to be quite frank with you. I'm not a member of the police department. I can't write an article about their techniques and their enforcement policies and that type of thing. I'd also remind the commission that e-bikes are permitted for people with disabilities, so when you start getting into, but just the police, but just, it's almost more confusing for people if you're writing all of these explanatory articles. From what I have heard from, Officer Burnett has been the primary person riding the e-bike. He's gotten a lot of positive feedback. He hasn't reported to me that he's been stopped by somebody saying it's hypocritical that the police can use, I mean, they're using it as a tool. He's not yucking it up on the trails. So from what I've heard from him, he's only gotten positive feedback from people seeing an officer on the trails, and being able to cover that distance and, visit more trails in a day than they otherwise would. I think if we start hearing from people that it's confusing, we could address it in the Crier, but I think at this point, because it's not an issue that's come up in the public, it would just be more confusing than helpful. Is there any more feedback about the sign design in particular? Because we're ready to go ahead and start ordering those and phasing them in, if PTRC is good with these designs.
The only comment I have is, adding to Fred's comment, I wouldn't limit it only to Highline Canal. If you're gonna have a sign that says no e-bikes and the speed limit, frankly, there's lots of other trail entrances from subdivisions and neighborhoods that should have the same.
Is it just gonna be those two always together, or is there gonna be like more speed limit signs or something like that?
Right now, we've just planned for those two together. And Rob, to your point, we're starting with the Highline since that's where we see most of the issues, but we went with this design too because it can easily be rolled out into the bridle trails on the existing bollards. So if there are other places that you suggest, we're happy to hear those too.
In particular, I'm thinking, when you come down from Yule Mansion and enter in onto the trail that is part of the village trail, I assume over at, Dahlia Hollow Park is another, and I blank on my name of my park, it's way southwest.
Woody Hollow?
Yes.
Woody Hollow?
I'm just thinking, basically to feed off of neighborhoods into the parks.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love the color and the design. I think it really fits in well with the village. Whoever picked that is great.
Well,
What's the measurement of this sign? Jeff?
I would probably say no bigger than 5 by 5 because we want them to fit on the bollards, and they're 6-inch bollards. More like probably about
5 inches square.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Emily, will these, I know, I just leaned over and asked Fred what was happening with his trail sign project.
That is
only
next on our list.
Great, and I know it's on the projects list, but I just wanted to make sure that obviously any of, these will work with kind of that re-signing project.
Yeah, and that was the idea, that these would all be sort of interchangeably fitting on the bollards, so there wouldn't be a need to add more sign posts that can get really intrusive, that it could
Right.
mesh with the plans for the renaming project too.
Yeah, good.
Well, thank you all. It sounds like we can move on to the trail renaming project, which was basically paused during COVID, especially as everybody got out on the trails and maintenance needs really increased. So we're hoping to pick that up now, and I can hand it over to Fred if you have a plan for what you think next steps should be.
Well, yeah, I actually did start it. And then 7 weeks ago, I had back surgery. And 2 months before that, I was basically crippled, trying to deal with what I had. People said, oh, you have sciatica. And it turned out, no, I had herniated disc, and I had bone spurs impinging upon the spinal nerve, and I had a 3-hour operation. But I'm 100%. And so because of that and because of COVID, my whole effort just came to a screeching halt. But I'm going to pick it back up now and get back in the saddle on that. So
That sounds great. Are you good if we put it on the October agenda as an agenda item? Or sorry, as the September agenda. I skipped a month.
You could. I can just give you a progress report at that point. I'm trying to stick with just the Woody Hollow corridor right now. And I will show the commission what signs I think need to be posted along, certainly with the e-bike sign, because I actually run into e-bikes on that access point that goes down from Franklin Street down to Woody Hollow Park. So there are people in my neighborhood that hopefully will see that sign. But yeah, we'll get back on it again.
Sounds good. All right.
I guess one of the questions that I have real quick on places for signs. Do we see people who go to West Middle School making use of those trails as ways to get to and from West Middle School? And are they using e-bikes? I don't know whether or not,
I
anybody
don't,
knows.
I apologize. I don't know where West Middle School is.
It's at Holly and Bellevue.
In
So
Greenwood.
off of, it would
It's
be
in
the trails
Greenwood.
basically
Okay.
off of Fairfax, or they go over onto Holly.
Yeah.
And
A lot of our residents go.
I've never seen, I'm not there in the mornings or when school lets out, so I don't know. I don't have any personal observations. Obviously, getting to West Middle from Cherry Hills, you have to cross Bellevue at that light. And so I don't know what happens there.
I haven't heard any complaints specific to that area.
I'm just wondering whether or not, that's another seeming gateway off of Holly Street in particular, that it may be worth a no e-bike sign.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole lot of adults, but there's a whole lot of kids who are using e-bikes as a way to get to and from school these days.
Well, and e-bikes are still allowed on all of our paved bike paths that are immediately adjacent to our streets, right?
That's
Right.
correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no issue with that.
So if they take Holly, the Holly path, that one's paved all the way from basically Quincy to Holly, which is up, straight up to West Middle School.
Yeah.
And that's quite a hill, so if the
That
kids
is a
trying to
hill.
get to school, I could see them.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. But I think to your point, Rob, to see if there are trails that kind of break off from there that are a consistent path that we would need to put anything on.
And I think that's, I think these things at 5x5 are pretty unobtrusive, and I would rather oversign than undersign, frankly.
Yeah, we're gonna have to monitor this, this whole e-bike thing to see how it's working out, how much resistance we're getting.
I expect it to be an ongoing discussion, both with PTRC and what we're hearing from the public.
Yeah, and I understand the other point of view. I really do, particularly the older people that say because of some disability, I can't ride a normal bike, and why are you discriminating against me? I get that. So we're just gonna have to watch it. gonna have to start the meeting all over
All
again.
over.
Yeah, I need to understand when this has been working.
From the beginning, from the top.
All right, for the record, Commissioner Kolinsky's here, is present. All right, and I agree with, Fred, I think that our e-bike discussion will be ongoing and it's time people change, so. Okay, so on to new business, our list of priorities and projects for 2022. Obviously, there's a memorandum in here from Emily regarding our projects, so Emily, if you want to present that.
Yes, so we are somehow already at the beginning of budget season, which is a little scary. But every year, PTRC goes through PTRC's projects and priorities that they consider the most important things for next year. So what I'm presenting tonight is the preliminary 2022 projects and priorities for PTRC. So I've included that in your packet and also the 2021 list so that you can see what this year's were. 2022 is very similar to last year. Sorry, let me scroll. I'm gonna go back. So this year, some things that we had on our list that we've wrapped up are that possible e-bike code change, which obviously council decided to keep it the way it is, so that expense wasn't necessary. We have wrapped up the Hamden Underpass Trail connection, so that will be disappearing next year as well. Everything else is really carrying forward, so you have the $10,000 that's sort of PTRC's standard amount that you can use for projects that you think of during the year. $21,500 for special events, so movie night, car show, winter celebration, spring cleanup, and I didn't take John Reed Park grand opening off, but I will do that. I missed that, I apologize. We have $10,000 logged next year for the trail signing project to continue. And then something else that's a priority for PTRC that doesn't have a dollar amount attached to it is the city's master plan. We are restarting that process. Thankfully, now that we can have large meetings again, so there will be information coming out in the next few weeks actually about larger meetings coming up for everyone to be able to give input on the city's master plan, so stay tuned for that. And then two other parks projects that we're planning for next year are continuing from this year. One is the Highline Canal Stormwater study. So we'll be putting out an RFP within the next couple of months for a firm to study the length of the Highline for feasibility to put stormwater into the Highline officially. We know that stormwater ends up in the Highline right now, but actually planning ahead for some possible infrastructure in the Highline. So that RFP will go out within the next couple of months. We actually have a draft that's with the Conservancy right now. They're reviewing it for us because they obviously have the experience with other municipalities. So then we're hoping that study will start this winter and continue into next year. We also have $25,000 for continuing to extend the irrigation at the Highline close to Bellevue, continuing to extend that north, which we're working on right now as well. And those are it for PTRC next year. We have wrapped up our major infrastructure projects with John Mead and the Highline this year. So happy to hear feedback from the commission if you think these are appropriate, if you have something else that you'd like to talk to the commission about prioritizing next year, I'll open it up to you.
Is there any feedback in terms of priorities, anything that's not on there we'd like to see?
I think it's pretty open-ended enough where anything I have in mind falls under recreational programming.
Well, I just want to say that the tunnels on Hamden, that came out great.
Thank you.
I'm really enjoying that.
We're really excited about them.
Has there been any issue with people using the underpasses for shelter as in homeless?
Not so far. So our PD is definitely monitoring it, but knock on wood, no issues so far.
Because they are completely lighted? Is that
Yes,
correct?
both are.
Good, all right. Have you heard anything about this homeless business at the church on the northwest corner of Colorado and Hamden? People living in their cars?
Yes, it's a program that First Universalist, it's a Denver program, so we don't approve it. So First Universalist went through that process with Denver.
Well, hopefully that won't wash over into us somehow. I haven't been through the underpasses yet, Aaron. I'm looking forward to,
They did a really great job.
yeah, they sure look like that. Although every time I've gone by them, I'm either Colorado or Hamden. I've never seen anybody. So,
Oh, they're getting a lot of use already.
good,
Yeah.
good.
All right. So,
Can I-
yes.
As far as additional, I think the priorities that we have there are great. Part of my report will include the master plan idea, but I do think that it's going to be a lot of activity, especially for us, because there's a lot of questions that, that involve the master plan rewrite on our parks and trails, and I'll kind of foreshadow that in a little bit of my commissioner's report coming up. The other thing that I guess I would list as a high priority that's coming in on fire, frankly, it even starts in 2021, is the council is looking at Quincy Farms. And Quincy Farms comprises, I think it's 26% of our open space in the village. And there's, depending on how you look at it, it could be a potential to give away 26% of the village's open space to a need to change the arrangement. But as we look at it, Anderson gave the property to us. My point is, it's a major, major open space item. And I think it's going to be, I know that certain members of council and or the mayor believe that the Quincy Farm is largely dictated by the Quincy Farm Commission, which is, by the way, now on hold, is my understanding. But it is a major open space piece, and I think as the entity looking at parks, trails, and recreation, it is a major part of what we need to be doing. And so I would comment that, while not necessarily a budget item, we need to take a very active and involved position with respect to Quincy Farm.
And I understand there's a meeting on Tuesday, the 21st of September here with everybody involved with Quincy Farm.
Yes.
Everybody and anybody.
If we want to totally jump the gun on my report, so, give me a second. Council discussed the evaluation process for Quincy. Okay, this is gonna be totally off topic now, so we're gonna just hold projects and priorities for a second. Because because I don't wanna give you part of the information and then have to come back and give you part of the information in reports. So
Just
that,
table it till we get to it?
I didn't mean to
We
open
can-
up a can of
I mean,
worms.
I guess this is what I would say, is that in terms of projects and priorities, I echo what you would say, that I think that Quincy Farms will be something we are discussing this year, that we need to weigh in on, that we need to look into, and everything else. But in terms of a project or priority, it's in like a little bit of a different category in terms, because we're dealing with it as it's coming to us, rather than like, we're doing the signs, or we're addressing the alcohol policy at our parks, or something like that. So I don't know that it needs to be on the kind of projects and priorities of what we're doing, but I 100% agree that it is something we will be continually discussing and need to take a vested interest in what is happening on that project. That would be,
Yeah, I mean, how it gets there, my point was to try and say, I like to put things as an actual piece of paper priority, because then you kind of always remember, and you want to check it off as an item that you've accomplished or not accomplished, that it rolls over. If it's not on the list, it's going to be something we're going to be working on regardless. I would like to see it on the list, but I don't need it on the list.
Do you think we could add it in the goals section of the project, for improvements in recreational programming?
But I guess the pause I'm having is what is the goal, what are we doing? Because the problem is to put in goals is going to be taking a position currently, right? Like, to do movie nights, that's what we're doing with our special events and things like that is what we're doing, and I don't know that we have enough information right now to say what the goal would be of it. So I don't know if it's like we can check a box because we've done it, because I don't know that we know what we're necessarily.
Well, I suggested to Emily, Stephanie, that from now on, Quincy Farm ought to be a discussion item in every single meeting we have. Because frankly, it's a mess right now. I've gotten calls, Kate's gotten calls the last couple of days. There's so many different rumors, people talking about what's going on, what's happening to Nathalie, the land hill, the whole land preserve proposal that I downloaded and read last night. I was shocked at how messy this is right now.
I was gonna say, could we put it like kind of as a standing item on unfinished business so that we can kind of,
My recommendation to the commission would be to put it under reports. What we don't want to do is what's on your agenda is what PTRC is discussing in terms of action items and feedback and things that you're actively working on doing or changing or making happen. Because Quincy Farms at the city council level, it's a little bit sticky to put it on your agenda as a business item because you aren't providing feedback on it in this forum, right? So what we don't want to do is put something on the agenda that's leading the public to think that you're making decisions about Quincy Farm on an agenda, because your agenda is the way we communicate to the public the business items that are happening in this meeting. If we put it under reports on the agenda, that's a little bit more of what it is, right? The commission can talk about it. I can fill you in on what's happening, but you're not making decisions in this meeting about it. So I have it on my list now to put it on the agenda under reports for your September and October and future meetings. But what I don't want to do is put it as an agenda item and make people think that you're making a decision, because as Fred said, you might have a crowd in here because it is a very hot topic.
Well, the point is, all of us on the commission, I would think, are going to get questions on Quincy Farm from our friends, from our neighbors, and I think it's important that we have some level of knowledge about what's going on with it.
I would agree, yes.
So,
yeah, let's put it on, I like the idea of putting it on
I do
reports,
too.
and then based on the information you provide, we can make a decision as a commission if we need to move it to an item for our next, agenda item for our next meeting.
Yeah.
All right,
good.
great.
The only other additional item that I want to at least mention, and I don't know if it rises to the level of being on the list, but when we talk about budgets, I've heard discussions within different people saying that they have eyes on our South Suburban money going to other areas than parks and trails, that it's a large amount of money that we used to have to pay South Suburban. It comes back, my understanding by ordinance is it goes into the parks fund, or am I?
So the way that South Suburban works is we were paying money.
Right,
It's a bill we're no longer paying.
correct.
We're not getting any money.
The money is now
It's a-
available in that it is no longer going to South Suburban, and it is accumulating to be a fair amount of money. And there are lots of needs in this village, and I would like to say that I think we need to be strong guardians of that money, number one. And number two, it opens up a lot of avenues that we might not have thought about. And where it goes a little bit, again, on the overlap is with the master plan. One of the major questions is, do we have enough public open space? Do we like the amount of public open space? Do we need more open space? And if so, are you willing to pay for it? Because everybody wants open space. Fewer want to pay their full freight on what it is. So I think that this question of open space and this money is an important item for PTRC.
I mean, it's my personal priority, but I don't know if it should be a PTRC priority to expand open space, since the large majority of land is privately owned. We're gonna have to go a different avenue, and hopefully have private landowners also see it as a priority themselves. So I'm always encouraging it. I don't know what role this commission would have in supporting that initiative as well.
Do we know if the land easement tax strategy that ranch owners tend to use would apply if anyone were to grant permanent easement to part of their property in the village?
I'm not exactly sure what program you're referring to.
I think he's talking about the conservation easement program that the state offers, tax abatements, and you can sell your credits and things like that. The fact is one of the prerequisites for that program is your land has to have quote conservation value in order for it to qualify. So I don't know, my property might not, but your Fred's might, so he might qualify for being part of that program.
I just wonder if it's something that we might offer as a program for interested potential donors.
Could we make it a I know since we're talking about priorities, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, could we list as a priority to determine additional ways to acquire more open space? And that may be looking into easements and tax credits and things that are not in my wheelhouse, or anything else that we could do that would increase the amount of open space that was owned by the village.
That item will probably be a master plan discussion item. I'm not against having it as an additional one here, but I am not sure that everyone in the village believes there is a need to expand open space. And you might hear that if we list it as a priority to get more, people may be barking on our door saying, I don't want more, or I don't want to pay for more, or, so what I don't mind doing that discussion at all. What I guess I was trying to say is there's a chunk of money, and I was only, myopically looking at that one pot of South Suburban money and saying, Jeff, how can I help you protect that line item in your budget so that you can get high enough wages that you can hire seasonal workers to run our parks and operate them, and they don't get diverted into an infrastructure project on, telecom communications or something for the village. That's all I was trying to say, and that's how suburban money. But if you want to broaden it out into the general question of, parks and open space, I think I don't have any problem with that.
I've actually I've been talking, I guess this will shorten my report, with Paul, who's working on the master plan, as well as Mayor Stewart about this. And he did, the mayor in particular expressed some hesitancy about this, as Rob said, as far as concern for kind of a land grab or eminent domain, that people are going to be worried that we're going to make them sell part of their land to the city. And I have to be really careful that this is addressed both publicly and privately, and to respect those landowners' rights. However, get them to buy in anyways. I don't know how to quite do that just yet.
Personally, I think we have enough open space. And it's time to just continue to manage it and provide good stewardship. But Tori, I don't know where you're gonna find more open space. Everybody has, a lot of people have large lots. And I think we have enough open space myself. I can't imagine where you're gonna find it. Rob just brought up something, and I'd like to just expand on it because it feels like this has been dropped from our agenda. And that is, Emily, what happened to the cell tower? It happened to me today, and Kate was at my house, and her phone rang, and all of a sudden, she went into a dead zone, and it's very annoying.
Do you mean moving this cell tower to the new location? Or is there another cell tower you're referring to?
Did they come in with their permit? And how's it, what's the status of that whole?
Yeah,
So the
we're trying to
last,
eliminate the dead areas for people on their cell phones in Cherry Hills.
that I can't speak to very well. I can give you a non-update about.
Well, we were dealing with somebody named Castle, or
Crown.
Crown Castle, so,
Crown Castle?
yes, so Crown Castle is the owner of the tower that's out here in John Meade Park right now that looks like a flagpole because it was in front of a firehouse. Now it's just a flagpole in the park. So they have a lease for that spot that they signed with the fire department. When the fire department owned that plot of land, we purchased it from the fire department years ago. So that lease lets them keep that cell tower there. They had come in with an application several years ago at this point to move that tower to a couple different locations, one of which was across the street in City Park at the opposite corner of Quincy University, and to actually make it two towers disguised as pine trees, and also hopefully be able to add some carriers to it and have some better coverage. At this point, they haven't officially withdrawn the application, but it's expired basically at this point. So they submitted, we sent them review comments, and they never resubmitted. So there's not much, we can't force them to move it, is the short answer. So if they want to leave it there, they have the right to leave it there.
When does the lease expire?
I think it was like a 30-year lease or something. We did not, we as the city would not have signed that, but
Well, I
we
certainly don't
inherited
know
it.
enough about how this works. Maybe, could somebody come in and tell us, here's how you solve the problem in Cherry Hills?
For cell coverage?
Yes.
It's horrible.
I'm not.
There
I don't
is
disagree, I feel like you should, but is that under your commission?
That's not really, yeah, that's not really the commission's purview. What I was going to say though is that, city council has had a group come in who is knowledgeable about that to present to them in the past 2 years. Let me find when that meeting was, because we have it recorded, and they will be able to, well, the recording will kind of summarize the issues that we have, the coverage gaps that we have, and some of the things that the city can do to fix it, but that's.
Well, it's only under our purview if the cell tower is going to be located in a park.
Correct.
Who would it start with, right? Who's,
To try and get a new cell tower?
yeah.
Possibly community development, but we don't,
You could always have an additional lease with a competitor of Crown Castle, like American Tower. That
Yes.
might light a fire under them to reconsider.
yeah. But city council has had a group come in to talk about this so that they can learn more about it. So I will find what meeting that was and send you the recording. I
I
can
mean,
send
I've
it to
said
you.
to Emily in the past, maybe all of you know what I'm talking about here, but if you go out 285 west and you get past Sims exit, you'll see on the right this huge evergreen that's disguising a cell tower. And I think they've done a great job. I mean, if you just quickly don't know that that's a cell tower, you think that's an evergreen. It's not a matter of just locating that, but if you look at the bottom of that one on 285, there's a huge barbed wire enclosure around the bottom that takes up quite a bit of space. So when they're talking about putting the cell tower over here in the northwest corner of Quincy and University, I'm thinking of the enclosure on 285, I'm thinking, that will look terrible. We've somehow got it
There's
located
no application.
up here somewhere in the trees where it's not visibly
There's no application at this point, so there's nothing to
good.
give them feedback on or comment on, because there's nothing. I mean,
Good.
It's expired at this
Maybe
point.
Chris Kramer has to get involved with this and community development and let us know what he thinks.
He's the city manager now.
Okay,
Paul Workman is our city planner.
okay, it's hard to keep up. Then have Paul come in.
All right. So in regards to projects, then just to kind of try to keep us on track. Projects and priorities. Quincy Farm, we're gonna move to a report every week and move it to an agenda item if we need to. Sounds like there's really not a need, we don't need to address additional open space as a priority or a plan for a project for us. So is there anything else we want to add on that, or are we good with the list as provided?
I mean, like I said, the only one that I would add is maybe just a general one, they say project budget, monitoring and analysis. And then the goal would be review funding sources and make recommendations. And just leave it real general like that, because that covers any of the discussion that we may have, whether it's the money that was formerly South Suburban payments, it may, other funding mechanisms, who knows? That's the only thing I would say.
I guess, and this would be a question, I don't know the answer to this, so Emily, this is a question for you. That money that is now, that bill that we are not going to have to pay to South Suburban anymore, is that under our purview to have a discussion on and how it gets allocated for parks and trails?
That is a tough question to ask. So it's not, it's just in our budget now. So as far as let me put it a different way. So this is the discussion we're having about the budget right now. So we don't tend to bring PTRC like line by line, you know, everything that goes on in the parks budget, because it's like, we're buying an extra trailer, we're buying, so I bring PTRC the top line, you know, projects that affect you, and less of the maintenance-based items. That money's just in the fund now, so it's not like, hey, there's 250, I'm making this number up, 250,000 extra dollars this year to do something with. It's being absorbed into that fund, so
It's in the
we're
general
not
fund?
looking for a specific, it's in the parks fund, I believe. I would have to pull the budget to actually know
Okay.
which specific fund it came out of. It's a little bit more detailed than PTRC would normally get in the budget,
And the only
is
reason
the
I
answer to
asked-
the question.
The reason I asked that, Emily, is because I think, to Commissioner Eber's point, you know, if we have this money come in, are there different things that we may want to talk about, improvements to park or other things that, because that money, that bill's not going out anymore, that now there's an access to it, so bringing it in discussion, that's why I want to know, like, where it fell, or was it just totally high, like, general city fund? But it sounds like it stayed within the park.
I would need to pull it, because I don't remember if we transferred money, which fund we transferred the money from. And
I
even
didn't
when
mean
I'm
to
saying
raise
the
the
parks
ruckus
fund,
here.
there's Fund 14, there's Fund 30, so this is, I simplify the budget a lot when I bring it to PTRC. You're always welcome to pull the full thing, it's on the website. But for PTRC's purposes, PTRC's work is really project-based, it's not sort of that line by line, we're buying trailer and that type of thing. So that's why I bring it to PTRC in this.
I seem to recall in the discussion for the construction of John Mead, it came up because that money had been collecting in a PTRC fund, and we had to approve using that, or a portion of that, for the general budget, the 3.5 million or whatever it was. And so I think that money, a lot of it was pulled at that point out of the PTRC allocated account.
We paid for the park using COP funds, which is basically a loan that the city took out. So there were match funds pulled from the parks fund for the park, for the grant that we got, but the majority of the park was paid for from COP funds.
Yeah, I was thinking like there was like 600 and something thousand in that account, and we were acknowledging that some of it was going to be pulled for the purpose of the park, because it was in excess than we needed for our budget for the next 20 years or something. No?
I'm not, I apologize, I'm not
This is probably.
recalling what.
Which means I've been disconnected.
Regarding John Mead Park, is there a way that we can track the usage of the park and how much usage it gets? Like, for example, do we have fish in the pond? Like, if you wanna go fishing with your grandson, are you able, is that public knowledge that out there that people can go, like, catch and release fishing?
We have been
or
getting a lot of phone calls, so yes, there are, for the record, there are fish in the ponds. There's still some carp that survived everything. There are some bass that have come down through Greenwood Gulch, and CPW also stocked for us this year with bluegill. And going forward, they'll be stocking again for us with bluegill, channel catfish, and more bass. So we'll keep working with them to get more fish, but there are fish in the ponds. We are getting a lot of phone calls, and we do see people out there a lot fishing.
fishing and it's catch and release, right?
Yes, that's
Okay. My other question is, I'm just trying to think of ideas to bring people there. Whether we need to advertise that we are going to offer permits for events so that people can, rent out, I don't want to say rent out the space, but they can throw a reception there with, alcohol as long as it's not glass. Or do we not want to advertise that, or how do you?
No, so that hasn't been,
Approved yet.
yeah. So I took the alcohol discussion that PTRC had to city council. We'll be talking about that at the September meeting. And council was not in favor of allowing anybody but city events to have alcohol in parks. So their preference was for like the art commission to be able to have an event with a special event like a permit in the park and serve wine or that type of thing, but not to have private parties or nonprofits be able to get special event liquor permits in parks.
Why? I just think that those events are so rare and few and far between that.
I think a lot of the concern was safety and monitoring people, making sure people were following their special event liquor permit in terms of like who's serving the alcohol, how's the alcohol being handled. There were a lot of concerns about people, leaving events and driving, that type of thing. So they opted to be more conservative, or that was their recommendation background to
I
you.
didn't think about that part.
So I'll be bringing the specific code language about that to PTRC in September. Our attorney's working on that now.
Okay, then one more question.
Sure.
Is there any spot out at Jogging Park that has potential for pickleball courts or no? I just came from Steamboat, and the pickleball thing is just such a family friendly event, and I just think like if we had a few courts out there, it would just bring more people to the park. It's all ages. I mean, it just breeds.
It's a good idea.
It breeds family event, and they're not big. You don't have to be big.
Down the road that the city owns.
What?
There's a plot of land right up the road that the city owns. 90 feet away.
Oh. You gonna pull out your trees for pickleball?
Are you killing me right now?
I do like it. I think because we talk about recreation and we have trails and we have that, but I think.
Oh my gosh, it is such a hoot, and they don't have enough. They're building more because it's just such a family friendly event that we just came from a family reunion where 8-year-olds were paired up with 70-year-olds on the pickleball. And it's just so fun, and it's just, I think of John Mead, and I think that would be a perfect place for that. And it's not too expensive to build. They're little. It's not like a tennis. The surfacing I guess is similar to a tennis court, but.
Remember when I talked about having like city programs at Palm Springs had a volleyball tournament through Parks and Rec. We could start looking at like a pickleball tournament that the city would
Yeah, it just.
program.
It's a good idea.
Well, I don't wanna, I keep telling you I'm gonna talk about it in my report, but that is a very major point of what the master plan is to look at. What do we use our parks for? How do we use our parks? What do we want to use our parks for that we may not be using them? Or are we using them you know, historically, I mean, I'll just, you know, I'll tell you this again, and Janny's here tonight, she was also there last night, but the idea was that we did not want organized ball fields, was sort of one of the cardinal rules that we have always used in our parks. We want them low, slow, and natural. And that type of question is exactly what the master plan wants to know is there now an impetus to dedicate more open space to what historically has not been used? Pickleball courts, I mean, in the 70s when tennis was hip, you used to put tennis courts in public parks. Now maybe pickleball is the new tennis. A long time ago it was golf or whatever, you know, who knows? But that's one of the questions that the master plan wants to look at.
Yeah.
Let me only, because I want to finish this topic and then move on to the other things. My only thing in putting out priorities and things like that is I want to be able to say that we can have discussion on many topics that are not specifically in these quote project areas. And usually what I'm thinking of is sort of budget and priority items. That I don't want to say, okay, let's say we did want to talk about how to help Jeff preserve in the face of potential raids on some of his money or budget or this money that's in the Parks Fund. It's not a special event, it's not a trail signing project, it's not a city master plan, and it isn't specifically an improvement on any one project. I want to be able to have it, the PTRC can have those discussions. That's all I'm trying to get at.
So then I think, Emily, kind of what I'm hearing is could we do somewhat of, kind of, maybe a vague line item that would allow for that? And then also, I think, to your point, Kate, I think I would like the idea of looking into more of like what are other uses for our parks. I understand it's in the master plan, but I think that also falls under our purview in terms of not necessarily creating a goal of like, we want to put pickleball courts in, although I agree. But, like just our parks being properly used for what our residents want and kind of just looking into that. So could we have a bigger, like a generic goal or project?
Yes, and something that I want to clarify is this serves more as, well, it does two things. This is really a list of what we really want to make sure we get done next year. But it's not a comprehensive list of everything that PTRC is going to do, and it doesn't preclude you from doing other things, so that that's clear. And it's a way to make sure that we've accounted budget-wise for everything that PTRC wants to prioritize next year. Because this is our process for, you know, we take this and go back and we do the really fun line-by-line breakdown of the budget. So this is making sure that your items are in there along with all of the maintenance and stormwater and all the other stuff that goes in our budget. But we can certainly add, I would leave it to the commission what you want to call it, something that's more generic about park, you know, future park usage or, you know, I don't know what.
About exploring the potential for recreation.
I would just put it under a category called visioning, and the specific goals would be to be determined. I mean, it's only a placeholder is all that I'm really trying to do.
Let's do that. Got it.
Yeah, you're better at marketing.
Awesome, perfect. All right, so are we good on that? Perfect, okay. Next is the donation. Emily?
Sorry.
Does anybody on the commission know these people? That we're dedicating a mark?
The Meadows.
Meadows?
I've never heard that name.
How do you pronounce it?
Middo, I think.
Meadow, okay. Sorry, I don't want to mispronounce.
I might be mispronouncing it too, so I apologize.
I don't know.
Okay. So we did receive a request for a tree donation from Mary Wagner. She is the daughter-in-law of Alan and Joanne Middow. Ms. Middow was part of the Cherry Hills Garden Club, so she walked at the open space at Quincy and Holly on a regular basis. And just for PTRC's clarification, that's a Denver water-owned property that we maintain as sort of a park open space area. We have a landscaping easement across it. So Mary had asked to dedicate a tree in honor of her parents-in-law in that location. Jeff and I thought that this was, there had been a tree there, so it was a great location for a tree. And we also, looking ahead, know that we are starting to run out of spaces for benches. There are still some spaces available, but kind of looking to the future, we thought a tree donation program might be a nice next step to start. So really what I'm looking for from the committee is both, first approving the tree donation in this location with this little plaque, and then that donation will go on to council. Separately, I did include some information in here for our ideas for a possible tree donation program going forward, so that appears in your packets in a draft form. But the only motion I need from the commission is approving the tree donation in this location.
So let's start with the tree donation and we can have a conversation on the draft, but let's start there. So does anybody have a motion?
I move that we accept this tree donation in that location on Quincy and Holly.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Perfect. And then on exhibit B is the draft tree donation that Emily's put together. So Emily, I don't know if you want to kind of touch on this.
Can I just ask a question on exhibit A?
Yes.
The recommendation for plaques. I'm just curious, Jeff, is it more difficult to maintain a ring around a tree that expands every year versus a plaque in the ground in front of the tree or something like that?
I don't think we want anything that's as big as a plaque, that's gonna be just on a plaque on right here. This will be, I think, easier. The ring on this plaque, it doesn't stretch. We were looking at some that were like a spring that stretches as the tree grows. But I think I can't remember why we decided against that one. It was big, it was really big.
That's what it was. It was the one that had the spring was quite a large.
Yeah, it was a big plaque.
charm.
On like a 2-inch tree, it's gonna look terrible.
So, and if we find that these are an issue, we can always replace them pretty easily with a spring.
Yeah, and the cable on this is just like a braided cable with a plastic coating, and we can make those up pretty easily too, so.
How much does the plaque cost?
It's about $54, I think.
So we have trees, we have benches. Do we have bricks? No, no bricks.
No,
Not yet.
I don't think at all.
We talked about that for,
Bricks for the
We,
park.
yeah, we had discussed it, but we don't have a place to install any right now.
All right.
Okay.
Any feedback on the draft tree program?
Along the lines of the draft tree program, and then I will let you discuss further, but is there like certain areas of the country, if you take down a tree, you have to replace a tree? And, okay,
Here.
well, on the corner of Quincy and Franklin, whoever bought that lot and took down all those trees, I wanna cry every time I go by there. But those were 250-year, 500-year, I don't even know how old those trees were, but they took them all down. And I need to go count them all so that I need to know that they're gonna replace every one of those trees plus 10 more.
And they're allowed to do that?
They are, I'm sorry, I'm pulling my email up.
I mean, I can see in the middle of the lot where you're gonna build a home, but along the street, the periphery, it's ridiculous.
They took
So-
every single one down.
I can't speak to the exact location of where their house is going to be since it's community development, so I'm not involved in reviewing the plans, but in our zoning code, there are requirements if people take trees down, depending on what size the tree is. Well, if people take trees down, they need to be replaced. Depending on what size the tree is that's taken down, it needs to be replaced with a larger and larger tree for the size that the original tree was. So our community development staff, Paul Workman, our city planner, is very aware of that property. He's getting a lot of calls about it. I'm sharing emails with him about it. So they are very closely watching that property to make sure that that ordinance is followed and the trees are replaced the way that they're required to
I
be.
don't know how they're gonna find trees that big to replace.
They're
trees.
not, yeah, and it's not caliber to caliber. It's not, you know, because you can't find, you can't replace them
No.
18-inch.
So they have permission to do that?
Yes, as far as I know.
Wow. Time for a language amendment.
Yeah.
Jeez, it's a shame.
With respect to Exhibit B on the draft donation program, I have two questions. And one is, how did we come up with $800 versus any other number? I'm not saying it's the wrong number. I'm just curious how we came up with the number.
We looked at other tree donation programs in the area. This is actually a little bit higher than other municipalities. Greenwood, for example, is $650, if I'm remembering correctly. So we upped that a little bit to account for some of the maintenance and watering over the first few years of caring for the tree. So that amount incorporates the amount for the purchasing the tree, purchasing the plaque, staff time to actually to plant the tree, and then watering for the first few years as the tree establishes.
My only comment would be is I would like it to be high enough that we are able to ask a pretty substantial tree of a certain caliber, or so that we don't have to worry about looking at a twig for 5 years, that Jeff has to really be out there every day monitoring and watering. I would like something, a minimum quality of tree exist under this program for your standards to be in the program, so that it doesn't become a massive headache for the village to have to run the program.
Jeff has the power. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think you could put something in there saying that the tree won't be smaller than a 2-inch DBH caliber tree. I mean, as simple as that. That's kind of the standard size we plant, 2 to 2.5. It just depends on the quality of the tree available and the price. They're all $250 to $300 for the trees, so they're expensive.
And in that vein, I would just like to say, I think that, we are very proud of the fact that we're a participant in Tree City, or whatever that award is. And it would be great to have a robust tree donation program so that we can continue to have good canopy on the village.
Yeah.
The only other question that I had is very minor, is, in the second line it says it's in memory of a person. And I have no idea whether or not, somebody's beloved pet rover, if we want to really, this is really goofy, but is it really only in memory of a person, or, my dog Rover really liked going to the park at blah, so I'll plant a tree there in loving memory of Chi-Chi. I'm just, maybe we could just say it's in a program that, to dedicate trees in honor of a loved one. And just make, 99.9% of them are gonna come in for a person. But I would just broaden language a smidgen.
Okay.
How do you spell your last name? E-D-E? You have to be sure.
I got,
Perfect.
I can make that change. I think the language sounds a lot nicer too, so I think that's a good change.
So, sorry to go back to this, but back to the Quincy Franklin lot. I just don't understand how that passed, or how, and I know that this is out of our commission, but when someone, if we do have that tree law in effect where you have to, if you take down a tree, you have to replace it, I just don't understand how that massive demolition of, I bet there were 20 trees at least taken down, and I just don't understand how that was allowed, or who who is the city government allowed that to go?
I would have to direct you to community development, because I don't know how their review process works in terms of where the new house is going to be located and that type, and setbacks and that type of thing. So I would have to defer to community development on that question.
Reports. I had more 2 questions and they got answered earlier, so other than, I know it's on your report, Emily, is, we have the movie night coming up on August 21st. So, definitely put that on the calendar if you have.
Does it really begin at 6:30?
The fun starts at 6:30. The movie won't start until probably 8 or 8:30. We have to wait until it gets dark enough. But we
Right.
will have games at 6:30, ice cream, popcorn. So there will be activities and kids can come play on the playground and get a snack, that type of thing. If anyone is available that evening to volunteer, we would love to have a couple volunteers from PTRC to help us with games and handing out popcorn and that type of thing. So
Kindergarten dinner?
I'm out of town, but I called.
Is it
That's okay.
Saturday the 21st?
Saturday the 21st, it would really be from like 6:30 to 8. Really, we would shut the games down by then. So
I might be able to. Sure.
yeah, you can just send me an email. That would be excellent.
Perfect. So nothing for me. Commissioner Murphy?
No, just, I've said enough today.
Commissioner Wolf?
No, I think I've shot my blood.
Vice Chair Levy?
Thank you all for this honor of being vice chair. I'm trying to get in on this master plan action. Some of my goals, I always have many pokers in the fire. And once in a while, I actually ran a piece of wood, but I'm trying to get in on this. I've always been a huge advocate for wilderness. I'm talking with Fred's comment about too much open space. And I know we have some disagreements about how managed this open space is supposed to be. I know in our experience, we left a good 10% of our fence completely wild, and we got bobcats for the first time. Skunks came through. We had deer who are not passing through, but living on the site. So I like some of this wilderness, and I'm going to keep advocating for wildlife. Maybe put up a wildlife crossing sign might slow people down. I'm not barely getting into that. Encouraging people to have porous interior fences. I get external fences. We have a pretty solid one, but internally amongst neighbors to allow some passage for more wildlife and open space. And I also think it'd be really cool for Cherry Hills Village to have sister cities. I was in super awesome trip to Iceland. I saw an active volcano, and Reykjavik has many sister cities around the world in different countries. And I think it'd be a really fun project to find other like-minded communities in other parts of the world that have similar values to us, to remind us that we are not alone in protecting our values, our open spaces, and whatever else we all agree on. And last thing, I'm finally getting to play piano known as Chicago Bistro on Saturday night at 6 o'clock, if you need dinner plans. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to piggyback on that email that Emily sent around earlier today, a comment from someone with regards to e-bikes. I was deeply disappointed in the outcome that this commission came to with regards to addressing the e-bike policy. And I don't own an e-bike, nor do I have any clients that own an e-bike, but I really think we're just closing our eyes to the reality of the situation, and I think we should revisit it again this year. I think we're better off having a policy than just having no policy.
Commissioner?
I did want to pick up and acknowledge the emails that did come in, not only the one that you sent to us today about e-bikes from the resident of Denver, but I did want to acknowledge the emails from Mr. Klute and Jonah Eisman as well. I think Mr. Klute and the one that came today from Denver Both somewhat addressed e-bikes on opposite sides. But I do think that Mr. Klute's email was more broad than just e-bikes. And it was general use of our trails and open spaces, with an idea that people need to be much more courteous and conscientious with respect to safety. I do think in particular Mr. Klute was referring to the Quincy Trail that goes along Quincy, but it is considered part of our trail system. It's I don't know, is that considered an on-street trail even though it's not on-street right there?
No, it's a bike path in one part and a paved trail in another part.
Okay, I think, he lives right there at the corner of Dahlia and Quincy, and so he sees firsthand people coming down that hill from the east going west. It could happen on, a lot of places, frankly. People are going way too fast on all of our trails. People are going way too fast on all of our streets. There needs to be a campaign of courteousness, and we already talked about it with respect to how we hope people will use our trails. But I do think that, when we talk about whether it's a master plan and an overall feeling of the city or just our duty as commissioners to try and promote good, safe, multiple uses of our trail system, the number one thing that always needs to be emphasized is compassionate consideration for the other people that are on the trail. And I don't know how you can tell people that they have to do it, other than just reminding them over and over again that this is a compassionate place. I will tell you by diversion a quick story, and that is that intersection at Dahlia and Quincy, back in the day, didn't have stop signs, and this was a long time ago. There was a stop sign at Dahlia going north, but there was nothing on Quincy. And one of my friends, basically, we used to zoom down that last little hill to Quincy, and you'd look right, and if nobody was coming, you would just run the stop sign and go. Unfortunately, he was hit and ended up in the hospital for a month. And, it's not something that's new, but it is, the moral of this comment is that if you're using your parks and trails, use them wisely and considering the lowest person on the trail. The chain is only as strong as its weakest link. If you're going fast and there's somebody that isn't able to move fast, you gotta plan for it. And so that, an ounce of prevention is worth a lot of pounds of cure. So I did want to acknowledge Mr. Klute's email. With respect to Mrs. Eisman's email, I do share her comment that she doesn't want to turn them into highly signed areas on all of our trails. I think all of us frankly share that same desire that we don't want unnecessary and over signage on our trails. So I do think that we have always been cognizant of that. On a different note, I mentioned many times already, last night that I attended the kickoff or re-kickoff meeting for the master plan. Jenny Carpenter, who's in our audience tonight, was also one of the people who's on the CAP, Citizens Advisory Task Force, I think it is. I want to mention a couple of dates so that people put them on their calendars. Is September 29th is going to be the first open house, or at least it's currently planned to be the first open house. It will probably be here at the Village Center. They will also be stationed at movie night and whatever other functions we have between now and then, to try and get some ideas and generate some topics. They did hand out a draft questionnaire that they would like to, survey, I think it is, to circulate either online or in person to when they see people. But I would like to circulate it amongst all of us on the commission to use all of our connections to distribute that out. I am very concerned that we did a great job of getting over 200 members of feedback on the e-bikes question. There's 6,000 people that live in the village. We are notorious and famous for apathy within the village, and I would really like to see if we can really stretch out to get everybody's inputs. From a PTRC perspective, especially on the open spaces, but it could be anything from, one of the goals of the village could be improving cell phone reception, like we talked about earlier. That could be a major component and a major goal of a master plan, is improve services to the residents of the neighborhood. There could be a lot of other things. I mentioned to you that one of the discussions we had last night was specifically P&Z apparently got a large number of comments already, and one of the takeaways that they had was specifically about parks and the use of parks. And we have always operated, like I said, that we are not a place for ball fields and organized sports. But apparently one of the takeaways of the early work that they did was wondering about that. Your comment about pickleball is right in that category. I do think that this right now is the first of what is supposed to be 3 open house meetings over a course of about a 14-month schedule to try and get to the end of, I think it's just the CAT's portion of the recommendation on the master plan, and then planning and zoning is the actual drafter of the master plan, and they're the official entity tasked with doing the master plan. This is the advisory group to P&Z. And so it's starting on the 29th, very, very 30,000 feet high, and coming down to very specific things. But I think we have people, everybody you talk to and read the little blurbs of why they moved to Cherry Hills Village, they talk about open space and the magic of life that is offered here. And so I think PTRC has a very unique and crucial role on master plan discussions. And we're only going to do that if we can get out and really, really get people to provide input. And I'm not saying that I'm going to task us all to go door to door and knock on 10 doors, but I do think that it is in all of our interests to get a really robust master plan that reflects what people want, is only based on how many people participate. The old saying that people who show up are the ones who make decisions. I would love to get a really wide variety of people to show up so that my old fogey people perspective of what I remember the village to be and want it to still be may not be at all in keeping with what the mass majority want. But I don't know them, so I don't see them in our meetings. I would never be able to reflect that. So I really want to encourage everybody to get out and about. The other thing that I do want to emphasize also is the Cat Anderson Quincy Farms discussion. As Fred said, I believe the council is looking at this on the 21st of September. It is our largest piece of open space in the village. It is highly controversial from what I understand at this point. Fred, I don't question your comment that it's highly disorganized at this point or possibly disorganized, but I want to key us all into that. I know I've talked a little bit about it in the past, but it is a really, really big deal. Somebody has given us a multi-million-dollar gift, and there's some discussion, and it's serious discussion about whether or not to keep that gift. And so again, it will be part of the master plan process, but I think council is going to be way ahead of that process, and so people need to weigh in before decisions get made to the point that people can't change them. I don't see it on our list, but I did. Are we doing a car show this year?
This is
Yes.
fire.
October 2nd.
Okay, I just didn't see
Do you
it.
want me to jump?
Yeah.
I didn't put all my reports on here because it wouldn't fit on the page.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. I just want to make sure that it's coming. But
Yes.
the other thing that I think goes a little bit in with our mission as PTRC is sort of a little bit of an environmental entity within the city. I think of ourselves as a little bit that way. And so with respect to the master plan, if there's a category that needs to be discussed, it would be something like, are we energy efficient enough, or technology for the village? Do we want to encourage people to move to a net zero home development within Cherry Hills Village? Or historically those arguments have been, that adds cost and people don't want to add cost to construction. You know, there's always, we want open space, but we don't want to pay for it when it costs money. We want energy efficient houses, but it pays a little bit, but over the life of a house, it may be much more advantageous than a fossil fuel. So I really want to encourage people to get involved with the master plan and think as broadly as you can at the beginning, because once we start going down the funnel, it's not going to be possible to come back up. This is just too many people. The horror stories, or the stories, I won't call them horror stories, that I heard last night is that the 2008 master plan was a massive sausage making process that took a ton of time, and they fired 2 consultants along the way. It is not an easy thing, and I just keep coming back to tell you, get involved and get as broad as you can think right now. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of energy for all of us on PTRC. That's it, thanks.
Absolutely. Emily, do you want to give your report?
Yes, so I have a lot, I'm sorry. To address your comment, Rob, about having a campaign to get the word out, to be courteous, that is going on right now. The Highline Canal Conservancy is in the middle of their Share the Canal campaign. So you might have seen on the canal there's some temporary signage about alerting when passing and why am I drawing a blank? Keeping your dog on a leash, that type of thing, and being a good trail user. So that's going on. We've been sharing that messaging through our social media channels on our website. And we also have been publishing in the Crier once a month a different message. So the one that's going to be coming out, I did a more generic one, actually not a specific Highline one in this August issue. And the one that's coming out in September at the recommendation of Councilor Gallagher is going to be the alert when passing, because that's some feedback that he gave us, that he is experiencing a lot of people passing him on the Highline and on other trails without alerting before they do that. So we'll keep trying to get that messaging out as much as we can, and the Highline is kind of doing their work to do the same thing and really make people aware that being a courteous trail user is important. For the 2 things that are on the agenda, yes, movie night is August 21st. We kind of covered that. We're showing Inside Out, and we'll have games and snacks ahead of time. Just email me if you're able to volunteer for that. The 75th anniversary event is coming up on August 28th from 3 to 7. We will have a time capsule dedication, pizza from Pino's, hot dogs, beer, wine, entertainment, a band, all sorts of fun things are going to be happening. RSVPing just helps us make name tags ahead of time and get a head count. So if you want to come and you're able to RSVP ahead of time, please do. If you decide at 2 o'clock that day you'd like to come, please do that too. You'll just have to wait while we make your name tag. That's really the big difference. So please help us spread the word about that. I think it'll be really fun. The 75th committee's been working really hard on that for quite some time at this point, because everything was canceled during COVID. The car show will be October 2nd, which is a Saturday, from 10 to 1. The date that just went out in the crier was September 26th. We were made aware that that is the opening game for the Broncos. So we are going to shift it a week to the Saturday following that. So that correction is going to come out in this next crier, and we'll be publicizing that as well. But that will be coming up as usual, just on a Saturday to avoid the Broncos this year. For Quincy Farm, so City Council at their August 3rd meeting discussed. Let me back up even before that, just to refresh everybody's memory. The City Council had written a request for proposals for Quincy Farm that they put out at the beginning of this year, and it closed in July. So Council received 2 proposals for management and activation of the farm. One was from Natalie Anderson, who's Catherine Anderson's granddaughter, and one was from the Cherry Hills Land Preserve. Council at their August 3rd meeting discussed how they want to evaluate those 2 proposals going forward. The conclusion that they came to is that they would like to hear presentations from Natalie Anderson from the Land Preserve about their 2 proposals. They also asked staff to prepare 2 options, one loosely based on where the committee left off with the master plan, It's not gonna look like that master plan, because we did get a lot of feedback on that we'll be incorporating, so it'll be a little bit different from that. But basically what the two proposals are going to be is sort of a higher cost, more intensive option, and then a low cost, lower maintenance option. We're still trying to figure out what those two options look like. I'm sorry I don't have more information. But, so we will be presenting to council on September 21st, along with Natalie Anderson and the Land Preserve. Council will have the opportunity to do a Q&A with each of the presenters, and then we'll roll into the regular council meeting, and it'll open up for public comment. I will warn you now, it is going to be a very long meeting, because we're having basically 4 presentations and Q&A, and then it'll open up to public comment. The meeting right now is scheduled to start at 5:30. That's not really going to be confirmed until next week. We need to confirm with the city manager and mayor.
Is that here?
It will be here, and that's a regular city council night. So there will be opportunity for public input. You'll hear from staff and from the presenters. Council is not making a decision that night. I really want to make that clear. It's presentations, it's information gathering, it's hearing from the public. After that meeting on October 6th, they will have a tour of the farm with Natalie Anderson about her proposal. And then on October 13th, they'll have a tour with the Land Preserve of the farm about their proposal. Both of those are also going to be public. So if you would like to attend one of the tours, you'll be welcome to. We'll be advertising the September 21st meeting especially very heavily. We'll be putting it on the website, putting out yard signs, really just doing everything that we can to get that information out there, so that people will have the opportunity to hear from all the proposers, hear all the information, hear all the budget information, and get their voice heard at that meeting, sort of all in one go.
Do we have the ability to, if we can't attend, but can we listen to it?
Yes, so
Okay.
that meeting, since it's a regular council meeting, it's taking place here. It'll be live streamed, so if you just want to watch at home, you can watch at home, since it's probably go late. Or it'll also be recorded, so if you'd rather watch it the next day or a month later, it will also be on the city website and on YouTube. So basically, we have a lot of dates for council to hear information and to also tour the property with the proposers. I do not have a date to give you at this time about council making a decision. That's sort of a next step that they haven't settled on yet. So, but September 21st is really the date to put in your calendar to be able to hear all of the information. And if you'd like to speak to council following that, there will be an opportunity to do so.
Emily, is Natalie's proposal online?
Yes, so both of the proposals are on the website, along with the RFP itself and a lot of background information. If you can navigate through the website, Quincy Farm is off the main bar at the top. You can also just go to cherryhillsvillage.com/QFRFP, and it'll take you right to that page that has both proposals on it. And I imagine we'll be posting the staff proposals or the staff presentations on there close to the date of the council meeting, since we need to prepare those.
Can I jump in and just make a quick comment?
Yes.
I'm beating the drum and I've done it before, but I do believe as open space, notwithstanding certain members' belief that everything goes through Quincy Farms, this commission has a huge role in deciding that piece of open space. This process seems very top-down to me. And it became that way because of the size, the dollars, and the politics, probably. It seems to me this would be much better to percolate from the bottom up through the different entities, and that we could then give better recommendations to city council. I just want to make that comment that it seems like that process would have been better than what has resulted. I don't think it precludes us from getting involved, and if we have to force our way through the door, we should force our way through the door, because that's what PTRC is supposed to be for.
I don't quite know what you mean by force your way through the door. Yeah,
If we
it's a
have to
public
make ourselves-
meeting.
If we have
The
to
door
make
will be
ourselves
open.
heard, because, I hear council wants to do this, council wants to review, council wants to interview, council wants to make tours. I don't hear a public meeting in there, other than public meetings are always gonna be, or public comment can always be a component of a city council meeting. We, as a result of our role here, have gained certain amounts of experience and understanding of what the open space is for people in the village. I'm not saying we know it better than the council members, but I do think we have valuable perspectives that we can add if asked. And frankly, I think there ought to be a public meeting in addition, just to address, you know, I don't know where this is going, but is we're going to accept one of these two? Or is there a third option that we don't accept either?
Okay, so that's what council's discussion was on August 3rd, and that's where the staff presentations originated from, because council wanted to make it clear that it might not necessarily be proposal A or proposal B, that there might be option C or option D that is city generated, I guess, or they could move forward with something that's a hybrid. I also want to make it clear that these are sort of the three, council is specifically inviting public input at the September 21st meeting. The next two meetings or steps in this process are those two tours. I don't know, and council hasn't decided what the next steps are after that. They did discuss having a specific public meeting at that council meeting. They decided they really wanted everything to happen as a first step in that September 21st meeting, so that residents wouldn't have to come to one meeting to hear from the land preserve, and come to one meeting to hear from Natalie, and come to another meeting to hear from staff, and come to another meeting to finally get their voices heard. So there was, I'd encourage you to listen to that meeting, because there was a lot of consideration about different options and a lot of emphasis placed on hearing from the public, and that being a very important piece of this.
Will the Colorado Open Lands Group be present at that meeting on the 21st?
Not that I know of at this time.
My only comment that follows that is that I think there is a recognition of a desire for public input. And yet, on the 23rd or 21st of August, I don't think I received any outreach from any member of city council to PTRC that this was going to be an agenda item. And I understand I'm supposed to track my own agendas, but on something as important as that, that is an example that there was not reach out to all of us on PTRC asking us to start getting involved heavily on Quincy Farms. And, you know, that's what I talk about top down. That's what I talk about if we have to, you know, force our way into a meeting, or not into an issue, I should say into a meeting. Into an issue, I want to make sure that we are an advisory group. I understand it's when they want our advice, but we have skills that can strongly be of assistance to this discussion, and I hope that we are used wisely and often.
Anything else, Emily?
I think I made it through